Okay. Let's start with another fun topic here. There's a couple of terms that will become more prevalent as we use certain technologies, particularly technologies of the cloud. And also, there are things that are unfortunately kind of a pain with regard to the agreements associated with using some of these things. So just as an example, this is what's known as an end user license agreement. And I extracted this from a specific website. Okay. And I want you to read this and tell me what website you believe this might be. So XXX is the company. Shall not be liable for any delay or failure to perform resulting from causes outside of reasonable control of XXX, including without limitation any failure to perform hereunder due to unforeseen circumstances, blah, 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 blah. So just to show you the lunacy of this, okay. This is from a website that I was with my daughter when she was a little younger, and I said, you know what? Let's be good and let's read the the EULA, the end user license agreement of this website, because I think it's important for you to really know about these things. And if you see this kind of language in a website, what's the first thing you think of?
You're not responsible.
Yeah, they're not responsible, but what do you think is this website? Facebook? Anybody else? Any other guesses?
Does the name have 4 letters in it?
No, it does not.
Since you said that it was during your daughter's age,
Yes.
it must be something that is 10 years old, right?
Disney Channel.
Is what? Disney Channel? No, you're getting close. You're getting close. Google, Apple? That's what most people would say.
I think so.
Penguin, YouTube?
Oh, no,
This might be, you guys might be, I don't know, would you be too old for this or too young for this?
What?
What'd you say? Close.
Pixar.
That's too funny.
That is too funny, you know? This is where I pulled that off of. And now, tell me, does that make sense?
No.
It doesn't. But this is the website. And I did this just out of say, you know what? People should be really, I told my daughter, I said, you should be really reading these things because I think it's important. And then when I started reading it, I said, no, she fell asleep. So I was like, oh my gosh, that's not good. Now, I present this, again, without any solution, but this is the kind of lunacy sometimes that you have to deal with when people have to, you know, CYA, you know, cover their ass, or cover your ass. And that's typically what these agreements are about, for the lawyers to say to the company, you will not be responsible because our website went down, okay? And this actually brings back another concept that some of you, as you go out into industry, may really have to contend with, because sometimes some of the services you may be using may be dependent on the existence of your company. But this is just one of those crazy things that you need to be aware of. And hopefully, maybe you might be creative enough to find some sort of solution to this. Because how many times have you said, oh, I read it, click, boom, use your software. Okay. Next thing you know, these people are selling your soul to you know, the NSA or something. Oh no, the NSA just takes things no matter what. But oh my gosh, I recorded this. So there's also the terms of service, and these are some very crazy things that occur. Are you over 13 years old? Okay, anybody who's under 13 can't use the web. I tried to get I basically told my kids to lie about their age so they can use things. Now, what is that? What are they learning there? But that is one of the laws that have been placed to say, you know, we have to protect our children from online predators. So, you know, in order for you to use this website, you have to be 13 years old. Makes no sense because, as you know, babies can work an iPad before they can even walk. And to put this kind of restriction is kind of silly. Multiple and fake accounts, you're actually breaking the law if you have multiple and fake accounts in some services, because they say, well, we don't know who you are, and that's one of the things that's actually being thrown around. Do we make a person not be able to be anonymous? And we know the issues with anonymity. Anonymity typically breeds trolling. People, because they are under the guise of not being known and having no sort of ability to be prosecuted, they'll make fake accounts. But there's also some use for anonymity, because that allows people to basically say, hey, there's something bad going on here. Whistleblowers, for instance, need anonymity in order to be able to root out any issues. Governments that have very restrictive policies may, you may need people who want to change the government, anonymity. And in some situations, actually, there are some old laws that essentially caused a lot of harm. In the case of Aaron Swartz, okay, he was one of the people who actually developed some technology in the computer industry. He was accused of taking data that was already public domain, right? Data that was already public domain, and freeing it up. There was another company that was basically taking that public domain and selling it to people. But his thought was that, well, that's already public domain. Why do they have to make money out of it? Why can't I just free it and let other people do it? Because he did that, he was actually prosecuted under some of these laws, and they were making an example of him, and because of that, he actually ended his life because of that pressure from the government. But all he was doing was basically freeing up data that was already in the public domain. Okay, so this is actually an interesting case that you should read to understand how some of the laws have actually been detrimental to technology. Okay. And with regard to free services, you always have to ask yourself, why is this free? Okay. Again, going back to the business model of a given service, how do they make money? You always have to ask that. You have to follow the money. Okay. Google, Facebook, Twitter, those are free services, but there's a cost in this case, and sometimes the cost is you. You are the product. Yes.
I have a question. You said it's illegal to use the web if you're under 13.
In some.
Do you mean like make accounts or
yes,
like?
in some.
Right.
Right.
I know, but like with this, so there's workarounds where under 13, unless you have parental permission, like with this.
Yeah, but sometimes they don't say that.
Right, but you can surf the web if you're under 13. You just can't make accounts.
Right.
So is that what you mean when you said use the web? Is like make accounts?
Make accounts, correct. So like I can't if you're under 13, you legally cannot make an Apple ID. Okay. Which is kind of silly if you think about it, because most 13-year-olds will either have an iPod or an iPhone, and it's crazy. Just a recent example. Last weekend, I told my daughter, she broke her iPhone, cracked the screen. So I said, well, why don't you go on Apple.com and get a Genius Bar appointment. So she used her account, and she was able to make that appointment. She drove herself there, and then once she got there, they said, "Oh, but we can fix your phone, but we can't give it back to you because you need to be over 18."
What?
Yes.
What?
And I said, whoa, wait a minute. And they said, well, how do we know your identity? I was like, wait a minute. Use your Apple ID to set up the appointment, you drove there, and they gave you the excuse that they can't verify your identity and your age. And I told her, it's like, for crying out loud, they know when you go to the bathroom. And for crying out loud, they know when you're finished. Because you put down your phone. So this is just one of these crazy things. I told her, go drive over there, you do it yourself. And she's calling me, it's like, oh, they won't let me get it back because I'm not 18. I'm like, this is silly. So ruined my weekend, but that's okay. Anyway, so free services, if it's free, you have to worry about what they're doing with your data, because that's where the money is. Okay. Yes, Carolina.
So technically, you can't use a phone when you're under 18.
I don't know about that one. So
That is very silly.
yes. So one of the concepts that I want everybody to get familiar with is a service level agreement. As many of us start using web-based software, this is the agreement with a company that says, this is how quickly, or this is how accessible our service will be, right? So 99%. So if somebody says to you, our service level agreement says that we will have the service up 99% of the time. Does that sound good?
No.
Why not?
What about the 0.001?
That's right. So 99% sounds good to most people. But let's take the instance of what other things do we use besides the internet that can be very inconvenient if it goes away? Electricity. Okay. What's 99% of 365 days? Go ahead, use your calculator. Okay, so that means that, what's 1% of 365 days? What's that? 4.5. Can you live without electricity for 4.5 days? It'll be very inconvenient. And that's why what you sometimes hear from service level agreements is the number of nines associated with their service. Okay? So if somebody tells you this is the service level agreement that I have for my process, you should calculate that out and say, okay, what does that really mean? If I have a 24/7 business and they're down for a day, how much money do I lose there? Okay. And that actually is, somebody's actually calculated that for every hour that a system is down, for an accounting system, for instance, it could be as much as $40,000 for that hour. Okay. And that also relates to some of the things that I've made you listen in the podcast. Okay. What's DDoS? In the podcast, the worm that almost broke the internet. The concept, denial, the distributed denial of service attacks. That is one of the things that happens quite a bit nowadays, where all these computers that have been compromised will start talking to one specific system, okay, Evernote.com, for instance. And if you have 100,000 of these computers talking to Evernote.com at the same time, what happens? Right. Nobody can get any work done because it has to try to keep saying yes, 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 no, yes, 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 no. And that's what a DDoS is, a distributed denial of service attack. That's one of the things that is still used a lot by people to try to either take down a site or just basically flood it with the ability not to be able to do their work. So that is one of the things that they try to guarantee against by giving you a service level agreement. How do they do that? What they would typically do is they'll have service centers at different locations. So if one is being attacked, another one can still service the process. So you know that the big companies such as Amazon will have multiple sites so that they can always be up 99.9999% of the time so that you can get your gifts in 2 days shipping before
Fake.
Christmas. So, but again, this is a concept that for those of you who find yourself in a situation where you're negotiating with a service, to know about what their service level agreement, okay? Because you, again, if your company is relying on some accounting software and they happen to be down for a day or a couple of days, I mean, you could, your company could go away just because you've lost a lot of revenue in that situation. That looks like a stretch. Okay. All right, but that's yet another concept. You should be able to calculate this kind of things. So now let's go back to some of.
All?
Yeah, that's all. Do a lot of talking, but so now I want to show you a couple of things that might help you in terms of getting ready for the midterm, and also try to show you that what I do sometimes is not entirely random. So one of the tools I use is Wolfram Alpha. So how many people have used Wolfram Alpha in the past? Okay, it's the way to actually get a lot of things that you typically will try to find. So the one thing I always do before each class is I type down.
Oh, you're explaining how you use us?
Yes, this is how I choose you. So I say 10 random number integers between 1 and 38.
Got 38
Or
people.
37, I think. And kaboom. So there you go.
What is my number?
So that's how I actually do that. So Wolfram Alpha is one of those things that many of you should try to play with at the very least. So just to give you a sense of what other things you can do, I'll show you some kind of cool things. You know, where am I? So typically what this will do is it will take the address of where we are.
Rochester, New York.
Yep. So, and it can give you some information.
Oh,
This is what's known as the IP address. So whenever you type rochester.edu, it will resolve to these four numbers. So everything that you type in, google.com, yahoo.com, whatever.com, it will resolve to this IP address. Okay. The way to think about that is to think of it as a social security number for a given site. Computers don't really know anything about names, but they know things about numbers, and that goes back to bits and bytes. Okay, so what this combination of bits and bytes is based of these bytes actually gives a unique address to a given device. So even light bulbs these days can have their own IP address. Okay, that's one of the things that you'll start seeing is that any of these network connected devices will have their own IP addresses. So that's something to keep in mind. Okay. 8 bits. What is the maximum number for 8 bits?
16. 10. 2.
255. Good. 255. So each of these numbers here is 255. Would be the maximum.
I don't understand.
You don't understand? Okay, so
Plus 1.
so each of these is, think of this as each of these, the combination of these 4 numbers will tell you where you are on the internet. Okay. Each of these is 1 byte of information.
1 byte.
1 byte of information.
1 byte back.
So that basically allows you that many different addresses.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense.
Are you being facetious? So what else did I have on the list? Where am I? And the nice thing about Wolfram Alpha, it does take information from other places. So if I say, what are the flights above me?
Above me. What does that mean above you?
They're flying over us right now.
Flying over you right now. So it will tell you, because it has information from the airlines. It will tell you where they are, okay, and the angle at which they're above you.
So if I want to take a picture of an airplane,
You can do that. So you can actually, it gives you a little map of from your viewpoint. You can actually start saying, oh, okay, I can sort of predict where these things are, because Wolfram Alpha talks to a lot of the computers that actually keep track of the aircrafts. So they can actually give that query, and it will go off and query all those other systems and say, okay, give me all that information, and I can present it in many ways. One is an actual sky map, and the other would be an altitude and angle in which to look at. So Wolfram Alpha is a little more quantitative than Google. If you type that in Google, I'm really not sure what you would get, except if Google is smart, they would go to Wolfram Alpha. It's kind of like Siri.
They do that a lot, actually.
I know. It's kind of like a Siri saying, "Here's what I found on the web." So
What about there?
Yes.
Another question. So does Wolfram Alpha receive like any kind of like recognition from the airline companies in order to have this kind of like presentation of information?
do they get any recognition? Do they allow this thing?
Yeah, like.
Well, the company, the airline companies basically have to make this sort of available, because a lot of the other apps that you use will do that for specific airlines. Okay, and the FAA has to know where all these planes are, so there has to be sort of an open system for this to be available. So that's one of the things that you can do with that, and one of the things that you need to understand is that it's not so much we have a lot of data, it's how you actually aggregate that data into something very useful, and that's one of the things. So not just planes, but you can say, okay, what are the satellites above me?
Satellites?
Yep.
I actually still don't know what satellites use for. The GPSs?
Yes. GPSs. GPSs. There's satellites. There's several satellite. Oh, whatever are it?
Satellites.
What
Yeah,
are the
what's that?
satellites above me?
The government are.
Okay. And just to give you to answer your question, what are these satellites used for? Well, the ones that I know here, Iridium is actually for satellite phones. So there's a constellation of satellites where you can use your satellite phones to talk in locations where there are no cell towers. Iridium is one of those satellites. The satellites that I use on a daily basis are things called Landsat for actually Earth viewing situations. There's MODIS, which is also another Earth viewing.
None of them are
And they're,
good.
well, they're probably not above us. Actually, there might be more. By the time it's 767 of them, so if you really want to look at that. And sometimes the way Wolfram Alpha also does their business model is that they will give you some of this stuff for free, but the other stuff you kind of have to pay for it. Yes.
Oh, like premium.
Freemium, the model that we talked about. Freemium. So altitude above the ground. Let's see what else.
Wow.
And that's just to give you an idea of how much space debris and satellites are out there. NORAD actually tracks a lot of these things. Some of these are dead satellites, but that's just the amount of debris that's
Red dots?
out there. Yes. Oh, some of those are active satellites, I think. So
Does it also include natural satellites?
natural satellites. So let's. I like these questions. I'll give you your $20 later. No. Where is the
I
moon?
asked a lot of questions.
Moon. What is the moon? No, where is the moon? Jeez. Where?
I just got roasted.
It's the moon or the moon? Sorry, I should have worn my glasses, not my contacts.
So fashion, that's you're actually wearing contacts. Where is that?
So it gives you all that information, current phase, and I think the actual locations. So there's a lot more information there that you want to do. So based on that, you can actually type, you know, when is the next solar eclipse?
2024.
What it says.
Do I get $20 if I get this right?
No.
Oh, 2019. Never mind.
So it gives you a map of where you want. So if you want to plan your flights soon, it'll tell you where to go for that location. So the other thing that, so you're saying, well, what does it have to do with getting ready for the exam? Well, Wolfram Alpha is also good for doing like the basic things that we did. So we say 10 decimal to binary. There you go. So if you want to figure out how to convert things to binary, this will give you that information. We'll also give you information in other bases, so in octal and hexadecimal. So that's something if you trying to figure out how do I do this, you can type that in. Cassidy, what's your favorite color?
Blue.
Teal.
Teal?
Yeah.
Teal color.
Oh, can you search mint?
Teal color. It tells me that it's 128 green, 128 blue. So
Oh, that's why it's 256.
that is correct.
Because
So
the total of them can only, like, the bits can only be 200.
255. That's why one of the things I always ask you is like, what is the maximum number for 8 bits of data? It's 255. So what this is saying is that it's in order to come up with a teal color, you have to drive green at 128, like halfway, and blue 128. And you can see also why hexadecimal is important, because this is actually how you would represent this on a website sometimes in a very compact form. Those are the numbers. These 8080 corresponds to 128 decimal, 128 decimal. Yes.
If 128 is half, then why is it 255 more whole?
Why is it 255 for?
Yeah, the whole of it.
Because that's like the maximum. So if I typed in red, for instance, teal color, if I said red, pure red will be metal. If I type in red,
Wolfram is hiding.
there, give you a color swatch. So it's 255, 00. So I would suggest you play around with this because, like I mentioned, and for those of you who had a copy of the old exam, that's one of the questions I ask is, I give you a point on an image, say, okay, what is this color approximately? I'm not looking for an exact answer. I'm looking for an approximate answer. Yes?
So just trying to get the terminology right, you said it's 8 bits of data has 255 or 255.
255 is the maximum value for 8 bits of data. So if I said, let's actually do that. Let's say
And is it normally measured in 8 bits of data?
that's a common way of representing numbers on computers because it's divisible by 2. So remember, we start binary.
But 4 is divisible by 2. So
It is 4. There is actually a piece of data called a nibble. You're like, it's like, yeah, you're making this up. No, I'm not. There's actually, back when computers were, what's that?
Because it's smaller than a byte.
It's smaller than a byte. It's called a nibble.
Nipple.
A nibble. 4 bits of information is actually called a nibble. Okay. It does actually exist, but people basically just sort of bypass that and let's go to 8 because it's a little easier, or it's when they were doing things, 4 bits just wasn't enough to do a lot of things.
So we'll go up past 8 bits or just.
Yes, it's gone up to past 8 bits. So one of the things that you probably hear people say, "Well, I have a computer that has 64 bits of."
No, but I'm saying, so will the base, like, you said, like, the basic one uses 8 bits.
8 bits.
Go up.
You
like,
can.
8 bits will no longer be like a measurement.
No, but the problem with it going more than 8 bits is that now you need another 8 bits to represent the information. Okay. The way to think about that is, suppose I had an odometer that only had a car odometer that only had 4 digits on there, right? What's the largest number that you can represent there? 999,000, right? I can't represent 10,000 in 4 digits of information. That's the same thing that happens with bits of data. Okay, that's the way to think about that. It's like, I have a car that only has four places for my odometer. Okay, I can drive that to 999,000, but then once I go to 10,000, I don't have that extra digit to represent that information. And that's why that concept of the number of bits is important, because in order for you to get larger than 255, you need to add another bit, or in most cases, another byte of information. Is that
How can 4 plus 2 999,000? How can that represent 999,000?
four digits that are decimal. So if you're driving a car, okay, so you have the odometer. Okay, suppose I only had 4 digits there. What's the maximum number I can represent? 9999, right? I can't represent 10,000,
Yes.
right? Because what happens when I go 10,000? All zeros. Okay. So there's an ambiguity there, because it's like, wait, that doesn't make sense. If you look at that number, that means you have a new car, but in reality you don't have a new car. Right? So it's important to know how many bits of information that you have, because that'll tell you what the maximum number you can represent. Right. We can, if we want to talk about this a little more, we can talk about it on Tuesday. But what I will do now is, this is one of the things you can do with Wolfram Alpha. Let's see what other things can you do here. Oh, favorite color, we did that. Binary to decimal conversion, we did that. What else did I have here? We had, if you want to know more under examples, there's some interesting things that they have. The one thing that I want to show again, which actually bit me in the butt several years ago, because I actually put an image in the exam and asked the students to tell me, hey, why don't you tell me what colors you see? It turns out that in this large of a class, there's a good probability that one of the males here is colorblind. Anybody here colorblind? Okay. Well, one of the things Wolfram Alpha can do is say, simulate to me what a colorblind person would see. That's one of the things. This is what a regular person would see. This is what a colorblind person would see. And the thing was, one of the students came to me and says, because he saw the picture. It's a picture of traffic light. He goes, I'm colorblind. So I said, okay, I will write down what those colors are so you can do that. But this is actually something that a lot of people don't think about. Okay, imagine making some important map and then coloring it this way, and then you find out that this is what they see. That could be rather dangerous, and there is that's why I said male, because it's a trait that is in a lot of males will have color blindness. So that's one of the things that you can do with Wolfram Alpha. Yeah. Pardon?
Oh, yeah.
Because the order.
Yeah.
What is it? Green's on top, right?
Yeah.
So yellow
but-
on the bottom.
Again, this is, this is stuff we can't do without computers. You can't make these kinds of simulations. So
Do you like wear like some type of glasses?
Yeah, that's the thing.
yeah, I haven't done it, but I don't know about it. But this is one of the cool things. I actually realized that I have to be a little more creative about this. So the one thing also I did, which was kind of stupid, I kind of said, "Oh, this is kind of cool." So one of the questions I typed in here is like, not here, but no, I said, "All right, how much could a woodchuck chuck if sorry, I can't spell. Woodchuck chuck if a woodchuck could chuck wood." I was saying, I'm gonna type that in. It's never gonna know. It turns out it actually pulled out a paper that somebody actually wrote and that answered this question.
A woodchuck could chuck all the wood he could chuck it, but a woodchuck could chuck wood.
Yes. And I think there's actually a value in here, and it says 361.9 cubic centimeters of wood per day.
Woodchuck chuck wood.
Yeah, and I said, well, I don't, what is, so I said, well, let's see, what is 361.9 cubic centimeters. Since you look at that and I say, well, that I don't think in those terms. So when I type that, sometimes you get numbers and you have no sense what those numbers are. So I said, oh, okay. I don't know what that is. I don't know what that is. I don't know what that is.
Volume of a USB can.
That I know. So it turns out a woodchuck can chuck about a volume of a US beer can
It's not
per
a
day.
lot.
And it's not a lot. That's about how much I can drink a day too. All right. Last 5 minutes. Questions regarding the exam?
Is the exam difficult?
You got a copy of it. It's very similar to that. I can tell you right now that there will be a question on the book.
Which one? The audio book?
What was the math instruction?
Math instruction. There will be a question on GIS. A question on pictometry. GIS, pictometry, not pictometry, Eagle View, the lecture. Eagle View, they're the same. They said they just went through a name change.
Oh, it went under a name she said.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. So
So it's called Eagle View?
Eagle View, correct.
You saw this jerk lips there.
No, that's not.
Outdated.
That's sort of a I consider that a bad question because that's
What is pictometry? It is the previous name of Eagle.
is not what I want you to remember about the company.
You ordered that pictometry shirt. So.
What else do we questions? this is your time now between now and Thursday to ask questions regarding the exam. Yes? Pros backup rules, we'll actually talk about that on Tuesday.
What?
Pros backup rules. Just to give you a
Oh, the one that you mentioned in the beginning of the show.
We have to do the, where's the math thing?
binary.
Yeah.
Know how to count to 20 in binary.
So,
It's not. It's not. You just start counting with 0, 1, carry 1, 1 0, 1 1, 1 0 0, and then 1 0 1. What's that?
It's another language.
you can't understand
Well,
it.
that's why I want you to go through that process. It is another language, and like I said, what is the first thing you learn in another language? Is to count.
ABC.
You want us to learn?
I learned the alphabet.
No, not hex. Binaries, you can do binary. Keep it with binary, because if you can count in binary, you can hopefully get the other stuff also. So up to at least 20, at least go through that once in the process of studying. Just go through it and just say, okay. And then you'll see that it does make sense to do. I just want people to at least do that by hand once so that it's seared in your brain how binary works. Other questions before we break?
When do we see our grades of midterm?
I usually try to do very good about it. I lock myself away for a couple of days and try to get through it. And occasionally I'll have my daughter actually grade something.
That's illegal.
Why is that illegal? She's over 16. It's not child labor. Kick her out of the house if she's not available. Oh, the other thing also, speaking of beer, blood alcohol levels. So there's a calculator for that. So in case you happen to wonder how long you have to wait to drive before you
Wait, how about your alcohol? Can we type in that?
You can. All right. Please go through the exam. If you don't have one, make friends with others who do, and spend some time looking over it. And again, catch me on Slack with questions. As some of you have noticed, I respond a little quicker on Slack than I do via email because too much email, right? Oh, and I will be right here tomorrow between 11 and 2 o'clock. So if people want to get in touch with me, I will be on campus for tomorrow. All right?
Would you mind helping me troubleshoot why my spreadsheet is not
IFTTT. You know what? Why don't we focus out to that after the midterm? Yes. Yeah, I think that's something that I know you're here all the time, and that's you've checked in via Swarm, so I know you're here. Let's work on that after the fact. Okay.
That's right. I never received any briefing from my projects. It's not very well.
Nor the project or the labs or
The labs and projects.
okay. Who's your TA?
I'm not sure. And I asked another TA, and she told me it's like
Jackie.
Jackie.
Leo.
Yeah.
Siham.
it's-
Okay, Siham has been having problems accessing Blackboard, so I have to catch up with her tomorrow. But if you submitted it, if you've been submitting it, I wouldn't worry about that too much. So Siham has been having issues with that. She just told me. It's like, well, why didn't you tell me? But that's okay. She just told me so.
And also, like for the presentation
Mhm.
lab,
Yep.
you mentioned the handout was TA.
Handout was.
It's like communicating with.
Oh yeah, the Hangouts. Yes.
Yeah, and I just cannot
Get in touch with them.
Yeah.
I actually said after the is that you can do it with anybody. So if you want to try to do that with either me or one of the
Okay.
somebody else, you can do
Okay.
that.
I will
Yeah, in
catch
fact, but you can do that over the weekend. if I'm on that Bitly CSC help, we can do it then, and then you can
Okay.
add it to your report afterwards. Okay,
Okay, sure. Thank you.
Rebecca.
Can I go through some of this with you?
Sure. Can we do it outside?
Yeah.
Okay. Nobody else? Nobody else?